All right, I think we will get started. Thank you everyone for joining us for the very first ChemVoices webinar this morning, or this morning for me, different times all around the world. So I just briefly wanted to introduce ChemVoices. This is actually a brand new partnership between IUPAC and the International Younger Chemists Network. And we're really excited to have you all with us today. Torsten, would you be able to go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So ChemVoices is really about showcasing the future of chemistry. We have a series of webinars that are planned featuring a number of awardees from the periodic table of younger chemists. So this was a project that was originally developed to celebrate the 100th year of IUPAC. And it was again a joint collaboration between IUPAC and the International Younger Chemists Network. The idea behind ChemVoices is really to discuss issues that are relevant to early career chemists. We will be holding monthly webinars, and I will be telling you a little bit more about our upcoming webinar at the end of today. If you would like to get in touch with us, our email is ttchemists@iupac.org, and we also have a website that's hosted by IUPAC, so www.chemvoices.org. Please connect with us, follow us. These webinars are all advertised and promoted by social media on both the IUPAC and International Younger Chemist Network social media channels. Torsten? And then this is just the organizing committee. This certainly is not a program that takes just a few people to put together. I wanted to acknowledge every member of the task force that has led to the successful launch of ChemVoices. This is an exciting time for us, and we are really excited to hear from Anna, Jesus, and César today. So I am now going to hand over to Torsten to begin the webinar.
Okay, right. Welcome you all around the world. I'm very pleased to host today's webinar together with Lori on resilience, a key in overcoming challenges. So a topic which is very current all the time, but particular at the moment. And we are very proud to have an excellent list of speakers, including Dr. Anna Regoutz, Dr. César Urbina-Blanco, and Dr. Jesús Esteban Serrano that I will introduce to you in detail soon. First of all, let me outline today's program for our webinar. First of all, we will start with a short introduction on the concept of resilience, and I will then introduce you to the speakers, which will present their experiences with resilience and different challenges that they coped with in their careers and lives. And we will end with a Q&A session, and I really ask you to submit your questions through the software here throughout the webinar, and we will get to them at the end. So let me start with a quote from the Australian author Bo Taplin. She was unstoppable, not because she did not have failures or doubts, but because she continued on despite them. And I think this quote, and also the photos that I'm showing here, somehow displays that we all face difficult times in our life and failures and doubts, and resilience should be a tool or can help us to still continue along this path and along this career and life in a positive way. And there are different definitions when it comes to resilience. And originally, the concept is connected to words like strength, persistence, growth, optimism, positivity, stability, flexibility, and hope. And there, originally, it comes from physics. It actually means that that's the definition, the capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after deformation caused especially by compressive stress. So it comes from physics, from science, or science, and it has been adapted to also our psychology and to the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And this is true for both society and as an individual. So we have seen some countries and some health systems have been better prepared. They have been more resilient in the current pandemic, and also we as an individual, depending on our current state of resilience, which we can improve all and learn, have a different resilience towards failures and negative times. Here's a summary of what the American Psychological Association provides on this topic. And they say resilience is essentially the ability to adapt well in the face of adversity. So essentially to bounce back from difficult experiences. And it's very important that it's not necessarily a character trait, but rather something that we all can learn and that we can train. And what's also important is it doesn't mean that we don't have difficulties or distress when we are challenged. That, even if we are very resilient, we still experience pain. But what they recommend is to focus on connections, to build relationships and to join groups, to take care, so as wellness, to take care of our own bodies, practice mindfulness, and avoid negative outlets such as alcohol or drugs, to keep a healthy thinking, so accept change and have a hopeful outlook, and to have a purpose in what we do, so to have goals, be proactive, and also help others. I don't want to go more into detail. We really want to get to practical examples now, and I'm very, very glad that we have this excellent lineup of speakers today. And I will start by introducing our first speaker, which is Dr. Anna Regoutz. She is lecturer in materials science in the Department of Chemistry at University College London. She is a CHEMS UK fellow and holds a visiting scientist position at Diamond Light Source. Anna received her bachelor and diploma in engineering from Graz University of Technology in Austria. Then she went on to do her PhD research in organic chemistry at Trinity College and the University of Oxford. And after 2 postdoctoral positions at the University of Southampton at Imperial College London, she began her independent research career as an Imperial College Research Fellowship before moving to UCL last year. So welcome, Anna. And first of all, I would like to start with you to maybe tell us about what comes to your mind when you hear resilience, or what has been a big challenge in your career and how did this shape your resilience?
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I think it's a very interesting topic to discuss, and I'm very happy that you gave us a very sensible definition for what resilience is. I think for me, I sometimes have a bit of a split relationship with the term, because I feel sometimes it's a bit misused just to say, oh, just harden up, right? Particularly sometimes when you're a female scientist, right? You hear, oh, you just have to be strong, just ignore, you know, the stupid comments, whatever, you know, in Austrian we say, just close your eyes and, you know, head on. But so I'm very glad. I think for me, the sensible way of viewing it is that, you know, we all gonna struggle with things, and I think academia has its specific challenges, and I think some of them are very personal to us based on our background and everything else, and others I think are very common, and I think those are the ones where we can learn from each other and pick up sort of inspiring strategies of maybe how to handle certain situations. I think for me, always the most important bottom line is you're never alone, right? It might feel like that sometimes when, you know, you get a rejection or someone says something quite personal, whether it's in a paper rejection or a grant rejection or on a panel or whatever it might be. But in essence, you know, there have probably been hundreds of people in this situation before, and someone probably has come up with a way of dealing with it. I mean, in terms of my personal journey, I think it's very difficult to pick out, you know, specific topics or specific challenges where I would say resilience was particularly important. Of course, moving around. So as you can see from my CV, I grew up in Austria. I went to university in Austria, and then I kind of left for the crazy island that Britain now is. So, you know, that comes with its own challenges. And particularly right now in the pandemic, being very far away from my family and not just being able to hop on a plane to see my parents, for sure is a huge challenge, right? And then I guess the obvious one is always, you know, as a woman, and you face certain specific challenges of sexism, which sadly we are doing better, but it's still not completely dead, even if we might hope so. So I mean, I don't like going into too much detail and recalling all the war stories, right? But for sure, from very early on, I mean, I remember very kind of intensely my first experience of sexism in academia was in my first inorganic undergraduate lab. where one of the old professors was sort of looking me up and down as I was like preparing a cooling solution for some, I don't know, a salt water solution. He was like, women are always so good at this because they bake so many cakes at home. And this has stuck with me and I can't forget it, right? So it's one of the funnier ones, right? But I think for that, I also feel like having allies, and I think this building up communities, again, you're not alone. There are lots of people, sadly, still out there who've gone through these things, and building up just ways of, talking about it and sharing kind of those stories can sometimes be very, very helpful. And then finding ways to kind of get through. And for me, one of my biggest motivational parts, which was also on your list, right, is that now I can see, the students that I work with, from undergraduate students to PhD students, they go on to do great things. They're inspired. They feel more comfortable in spaces, right? We've managed to maybe evolve a little bit. And I think just seeing them succeed and grow and do excellent things is I think, one of the best reasons to be in academia, right? At least for me. Yeah.
Sounds very great. Thank you, Anna. It's great to have you here. And I will continue to the next and introduce the next speaker, who is César Alejandro Urbina-Blanco. He studied chemistry in Universidad Simón Bolívar in Venezuela and did his final year project in the Institute of Chemistry of Organometallic Compounds in Florence, Italy. César then completed his PhD in organometallic chemistry and catalysis in the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, where he worked on the development of commercial olefin metastasis catalysis, and then he worked as a postdoc in the field of green chemistry in RWTH Aachen, Germany. He then joined the Lab for Chemical Technology of Ghent University in 2016 and became in 2019 a senior FWO postdoctoral researcher. In addition to his research, he is also the president of the Ghent University postdoc community. So welcome, César.
Thank you, Thorsten, for the introduction. And for me, it's very important, resilience, and it's something that is fundamental for researchers, because normally when there's not a pandemic going on, we face many challenges, but at the moment everything has been multiplied by 1,000, because it's not only getting a paper rejected, it's getting a paper rejected while we think that the world is coming to an end. So exercising resilience is extremely important. Personally, I consider myself a resilient person, and the point is sometimes I feel like I'm not resilient at all. So it comes and goes. I go through periods where I think, oh no, I can't do this anymore, and then you breathe and then you realize, yes, you can do this, and the next day you try a little bit harder. But I think that the key message that I want to give to all of you is that regardless of how you feel, you might have days where you face a problem and you think, or a challenge, and you think, okay, this is going to be the end of me. This is not going to, I can't do this. But most of the time, you actually can do it. Most of the time, if you talk about it with your friends, if you talk about it with your colleagues, you can find a way to solve these problems. And the important thing is, even when you feel overwhelmed, that you take time to process your feelings, and also that you acknowledge the fact that, yeah, there is a problem. I mean, there was recently a story on Twitter about toxic positivity, and that is true. Like, not everything can be solved, but most things can be solved. So it's important that you are realistic about it. Like, can this problem be fixed or not? And if it cannot be fixed, then you just have to accept it, because you can change it. And if it can be fixed, then you need to find solutions and then try to come up with the plan. And I think that's where we're very good at. Like, we as scientists are very good at coming up with plans and trying to fix things and finding solutions. So I think that's what has always helped me and kept me going, that trying to find like a new path, a new way to change things. I think one of the biggest examples of resilience I have at the moment is what I did with my master's students. So at the beginning of before Corona, I had 4 master's students that I had to supervise, and they were coming as exchange students from Portugal. It was great, but then we had to switch to online, and most of the projects were experimental, so we had to switch them to DFT calculations, and then comes the part of, well, you have to train now 4 students who've never done DFT calculations online. how do you do this? And then trying to find a method, trying to find a way, trying to find a solution. And we actually did kind of a really nice work. And I'm very proud of my students for being able to accept this change. And this is, I mean, it's a nice story. They're still working on their thesis. But the point is that when this happened, we were really for a couple of days thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen now? Can we really do anything? Can we solve this? And just after careful consideration and trying to analyze our possibilities, we were able to come up with a plan. And that's, for me, like the most important thing about resilience is you need to have a cool head. You need to think about, okay, how can I proceed? How can I do things? And just lay it out. So if you have a problem, just write down everything that you can and try to come up with solutions and write them down and then think, okay, is this better than that? Is that better? And then talk to people, because most of the time we are not the first people to face a challenge. I mean, we have the internet to communicate. If you are on Twitter and you ask, has anyone experienced this? Most likely you will find someone who has done it. So my advice is to just go out and whenever you have a problem, just ask the people around you if they faced it before and if they can give you any advice, and try to move on.
Thank you, César. It was great. So our next speaker will be Jesús Esteban Serrano. He earned his bachelor, master's, and PhD degrees in chemical engineering at the Complutense University of Madrid in Spain. As an undergraduate, he completed an exchange year at the University of Texas at Austin in the US, and as a PhD student, he did a research stay at the Technical University of Dortmund in Germany. And then in 2015, Jesús moved to the University of Birmingham for his first postdoc, and in 2017 returned then to Dortmund as part of the Green Talents program, which led to his second postdoc at the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Energy Conversion in Mülheim an der Ruhr in Germany. And in July 2020, he began his current appointment as a lecturer in chemical engineering at the University of Manchester.
So yeah, well, thanks for the kind introduction. Thanks to YCN and the UPAC for organizing this ChemVoices webinars, because I think in the end it will be useful for many people, or at least they have something to listen to and see that they are not alone whenever they have to face some challenges, you know, or they can maybe reach out to us. I believe this could be a good tool for them. I mean, at least having our names out there, maybe at some point someone wants to contact us, and I will be more than happy to try to help if I can. So yeah, I wanted to, I mean, you defined resilience quite well before, and I wanted to put it a little bit into the perspective of mobility, considering, well, Torsten just read my CV a little bit. And as you can see on the map there, I've been moving quite a lot between Europe and the US, mostly Germany, Spain, and the United Kingdom, been going back and forth. And yeah, I mean, considering that one has to move a lot to pursue a career in research in general, but in particular in my case in academia, one has to acknowledge the consequences of doing this. So that doesn't mean that if you do it and you don't feel comfortable, you have to deal with it and man up and go for it, you know, and just be alone. But before you take such a challenge, you have to know yourself a little bit to know that how much you can endure, even though you can ask for help. And this is obviously, there's resources out there, and this is what part of what we aim to do here, give resources if someone has an issue. But anyway, part of being resilient, being out of home, is at first dealing with loneliness. And as I said before, you're not alone, and that's true. But until you make some connections, some kind of network, and you start over in a new place, there's some moments that you're going to be a little bit alone. So that means in the end that you have to open up to a lot of circumstances. First, you have to learn how to be social, and that doesn't mean being the funniest guy on earth. That just means reaching out to people, just be polite, be kind, introduce yourself, don't be afraid to do that. And those lonely moments will dramatically reduce. And I've learned this, I'm not going to say the hard way, but I've learned that with time. You know, I used to be this kind of very closed guy, closed in the sense that maybe being a little shy, but the more you're out of your environment, the more you learn to grow in that sense. And then you have to integrate in your group, your research group, understand the culture of the working culture of your group, or whatever you are, and also the social culture of your group. I mean, if there's, I don't know, Friday evening beers, go for them. Or, I mean, if you don't like beer, you don't have to drink a beer, of course, but be as social as you can, and approach people. Don't be, because in the end, a lot of success in working comes with being able to relate to others and understand the others, so you can work together in a better way. Like I said before, be also open-minded and understand other behaviors. So if I say I don't want to drink a beer, don't forget about that guy. Maybe that guy, I don't know, for some reason cannot, maybe religious beliefs or other type of reasons, they cannot be in such environments. So try to adapt a little bit and get a compromise to engage with them as much as you can. Another point that I have here is get a life out of the lab, and that means engage in other activities in your environment, because that will lead you to develop other skills, and that will lead you to more people, believe it or not. And that's even better because they will have those shared interests with you, whilst not being part of the everyday's work life. And I think that's pretty cool. I found very, very nice people this way doing this. And then, again, going back to the mobility issue, right, or the mobility aspect of such an academic career is make friends, make connections, make them last, but avoid as much as you can to get too involved or too attached. I mean, of course, be friends with everyone, but you might end up suffering when you have to move a lot. So, I mean, you can always keep in touch. You can always see each other in other places, of course, but it's not going to be the same way inevitably. You're not going to see daily once your postdoc in a place is over with, and then you have to move on, you know. Do keep touch with them, because you might encounter them at other points of your career or your personal life. But I don't know, maybe it's me being a little defensive, but I'd rather be very friendly but not too personally involved, because sometimes you can suffer a little bit. And then, like Anna said, living in academia is not a failure by any means. Sometimes academics can be, or people in research at universities and research centers can be a little bit stubborn about this, and it is by no means a failure to leave. And I've been close to leaving a couple of times, and I didn't do it in the end, but I've known people who have left and they couldn't be happier. So do not let yourself believe that academia is the only way. And yeah, those are basically the points I wanted to cover, but most importantly, get the balance right. And that is, take care of your work. It is important to work, but do not disregard your mental health, and do not disregard the fact that you're going to come across challenges and you have to deal with them, not only from the point of view of work, from that perspective, but also from your personal well-being. You cannot stress out too much, so to speak. So keep that balance right. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover to begin with. Then I guess we will talk long enough to have other issues come up.
Right. Thanks a lot for all your introductions. It has been already a great introduction into the topic and your experiences and the challenges you faced, and you already some advice. And now in the next step, we will start with a sort of a panel discussion. So we will go to some questions, as it is in the form of a discussion, and later on we move also to your questions. So again, I'd like to ask the audience that you can continue to submit your questions to us, and we will address them throughout the webinar. So first of all, I would like to ask, I will continue on a topic that Jesús has already spoken about a lot, or touched already on in his introduction. It's about building up relationships and friendships. And so the thing is, you all have lived in multiple places, just within really a low number, just within a few years. And my question was now, what advice can you give? How did you maintain and build meaningful relationships and friendships during this time? So maybe we can start with César with that question.
I always say that when you are in a place, the most important is the people that you're with. So you can do research anywhere, but if you don't like the people that you're working with, that's very hard. For me, one of the best ways of meeting people and like making friends is through common interests. So I like to cook, for example. So what I always did whenever I joined a new place was inviting some people from home and just cooking some food and then sharing through that. So that's for me, that's something that always works, like finding a common interest. The other thing that I did, for example, was when I moved to Germany, I started to learn German. So in that group, you already have something in common. You're all immigrants. You're all trying to learn the language. So I think that the key to making new friends is identifying something that you like to do, and then trying to find people that might want to do that with you.
Mm-hmm.
But, Anna, do you also notice?
Yeah, definitely the cooking. So I remember during one of my postdocs, I had a really tough time, and you know, some parts of that group and everything just weren't great, but there were a lot of Greeks around, and Greeks are excellent at cooking. So we just used to, you know, go to one of our flats or places and would just make, you know, crazy Greek food. That takes hours to cook, during which time at least I really enjoyed some Greek wine. And then, you know, you just kind of forget about certain things. So it's, for me at least, it's a very good way of coping and connecting with people. And, you know, I would make some Austrian things and we kind of exchange notes. And I mean, today I still have the recipes of some of those Greek things in my phone. And, you know, on a bad day, they come out. And I've learned to use cinnamon in my cooking way more than I used to. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm really crap at keeping in touch. Most of my close friends, they will tell you a story or 100 about how bad I am. But my way is that I travel a lot, which means actually, although some of my best friend lives in the US, on an Air Force base somewhere in the middle of nowhere, but I've learned to really make an effort to, when I travel to a place, I just take a moment to think, like after panic booking the flights and the hotel, to go like, hang on, who do I know in Berlin or who do I know in Boston? And I've really, over the last few years, always like when it was a conference, a beam time at the synchrotron, always like, let's think of 2 people who are sort of geographically close and just catch up with them, just to keep these relationships going. And I mean, at least for me, often it's a bit awkward the first 10 minutes because, you know, so much has happened in each other's lives and you haven't really spoken for a year or 2 or 5. But usually after 20 minutes or so, you remember why you got on so well. And then, you know, it's just really nice. And that's the kind of way I've been trying to just keep these relationships alive. Because as César said, I think for me, this is the most important thing now, right? You can do science wherever and in lots of different places, but if the people are shit, you're not going to enjoy it, right? Let's be honest. So, and I don't know, as the last thing, one of the beautiful things about academia is, once, like me, I'm fortunate, I'm independent, I've got my group, I can now pick who I work with. It's beautiful. Because I don't necessarily pick the people with the nature papers. I pick the people who I like, which is biased, absolutely. But you know what? For now, it's worked out. We've done beautiful science and we had fun along the way.
That sounds great, your advice of, I also do that when I go to conferences, of meeting some people that I know there. And also with the advice that it's not about the science, but the people that surround us. I don't know, Jesus, do you want to say anything in addition, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, basically, since I'm the third to speak, I can only agree with the first 2 speakers, right? But it's true. I mean, what César said about identifying something that you may have in common. For me, it's not cooking. I suck at cooking. I'm terrible at that. But I am a metalhead, so to speak. So going to these rock and metal concerts and all that. So I would always, they're not always easy to spot, but I always found my way of identifying the 2-3 metalheads around the labs and all that. And I would go, I remember my time in Birmingham, for instance, right? I would, there was a venue there called the Asylum and another one, the Institute, right? So we would go not necessarily every now and then, but we would easily go, I don't know, once every 2 months or something. We would find something to go for, and also find new bands, I might know and the others didn't, or the other way around. So it's a great way to connect. I would do that with 2 or 3 other people. It's a great way. I mean, another way, maybe more, let's say, normie, so to speak, not so underground, would be the football evenings, right? The UEFA Champions League evenings. I mean, those would be monumental, watching Real Madrid or whatever other team. I mean, but it's amazing how you can connect with these things with a certain set of people. And we would actually do that not just out of interest, but also out of mental health. Meaning, for instance, the Wednesday evening matches of Champions League, right? I mean, we would know they would start at 8:30 or 8:45 or something. So that would be a perfect time to say, hey, drop whatever you're doing in the lab. It's late enough. Let's go watch football and have a couple of beers or Coca-Cola, whatever. So we would do that out of common interest and to link to people, but also to say, hey, enough is enough for today. Let's just drop it and do something else, And then I can also agree with what Hannah said. Whenever you're close to someone, close enough geographically, do your best to see them, and that takes us to the power of social networks here, right? I mean, you may know that person is in that particular place because you saw a certain picture on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and then you might know they're in that particular area. So it's good to pay attention to those things. I mean, don't be a psycho, of course. Everybody has to have their own life, but it means a lot when I'm in Madrid, or when someone comes to Madrid. I may not be here, I may be in another place, but when someone says, hey, I'm gonna be in the area, are you around? Probably not, because I'm working out of here. But I like last month, actually, I had a friend visiting Spain, visiting Madrid. He had to go to the embassy for some particular reasons, and he happened to write me, and I happened to be here. So, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. So it's always nice, and it's always sweet to know that someone's thinking of you a little bit, So keep that alive. Keep that alive. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. I can agree with César and Anna.
So we have learned a lot about relationships and so connected to moving around in the world. Now I want to move to some other aspect, and it's about working hours. So about work-life balance and about this aspect. So essentially, we know it mainly from academia, of us probably as speakers, but there are in general environments that really demand long working hours. And sometimes we are also very passionate about our research. So we are maybe not even forced to do a lot of work for it, sometimes by the boss, but we ourselves want to continue and find the answer to the question and stay in the lab on the weekend or late in the evening. And now my advice, or my question would be to you, how did you manage, or how do you manage a work-life balance? Also, while you're at the same time building up a successful career. So this competitive environment where you want to succeed and at the same time keep your work-life balance. So maybe Anna can start.
Oh dear, I'm smirking a lot because let's just put it out there. I'm really crap at it. Like, particularly if you ask my husband, he will tell you, don't ever ask Anna about work-life balance. This is like something she has to work on. So, I mean, I really have my downfall is my own passion and just stupid focus sometimes, right? Where I've definitely made some mistakes along the way where science was more important than everything else. And I mean everything else, right? But I've learned a few things. So one of the things I did during my PhD was that I had a hard and fast rule that I would not touch any work-related thing on a Saturday, right? And that might be a weird choice because I did work on Sundays, and that was my personal choice, not my boss. My boss was awesome. but it was just my personal choice of coping with the amount of work that I thought I had to do. But Saturday was a don't touch anything, don't open emails. And I managed for most parts to push that really throughout my whole PhD, with the exception of a few synchrotron measurement times. But for that, in my world, there is nothing that beats a synchrotron experiment. So maybe I'm very sad, but you know, that's how it is. And now, so, you know, sometimes we can't, or at least I feel I cannot avoid working on weekends, working long hours, because an experiment is running, because a student needs help, because I am at the synchrotron, because I need to really finish that proposal. But what I've really tried to do recently is to limit weekend travel. So many of you will know a lot of conferences start on a Sunday evening, right? Or they start first thing on a Monday. And for me, I think that's actually, we should stop that. So, I mean, I'm now organizing a few meetings, and for me, they have to be midweek meetings, right? Like most meetings are, what, 3 days, except for the really huge ones. So let's make it Tuesday till Thursday, or let's start lunchtime on a Monday, or finish lunchtime on a Friday, right? To give people who have a life outside academia some time to travel that isn't the weekend. So, and I've become a bit more brutal to say, no, I'm not taking the talk slot at 8 a.m. on Monday, because actually I'm only traveling Monday morning, right? After I've had my weekend and some time off. I don't always succeed, but that's one of the things I've been trying to really kind of implement as a rule for myself, to be a little bit more selfish and say, no, I won't immediately say yes to an early talk slot, or I won't, okay, I will still immediately say yes to any synchrotron beam time. But, you know, trying to improve.
That's great advice. So, César or Jesus, do you want to? Jesus, do you want to add in?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's important to set that kind of obligation of resting or having a life out of your academic life or your work life in general. Like Anna said, I mean, in my case, I'm pretty much alone when I'm working abroad, so I can. Sometimes I must also say that I suck at organizing those things, and I'm not the best person to say who shouldn't put long hours, because I really do put long hours. But that's in part because I am alone most of the time when I'm out of my hometown of Madrid. So let's say I don't mind doing that. But at the same time, throughout the years, I've realized that, hey, body and mind are not responding like when I used to be 25 years old. So I have to avoid going full throttle all the time, so to speak, and take those little times to rest, and find something to do. Going back to the example I said before, if there's a concert I'm looking forward to, from 2 months before when I got the ticket 2 months before the performance, I always say, hey, that's definitely the day you're going before to get your couple drinks before, then go to the concert, and then if there's a party, go to the party, and take that day off. Sometimes there's obviously inevitable things along the way with work, and there's deadlines and all that, but I totally agree with Anna. Try your best to set your free time and your boundary, because that's an obligation to yourself. Don't forget, if you don't take care of yourself, nobody will. Let's say that you're the only person who's going to remain with yourself your whole life. So try your best to keep those moments to yourself, because in the end it's going to be counterproductive for work if you keep pushing the envelopes. So yeah, do that. Keep your leisure time as an obligation, so to speak. César, you may want to add something here.
Yes, I want to add something, which is as a mentor and as a supervisor, I think we have a responsibility with our students to make sure that our expectations are realistic and that they know that they need to have time off. So one of the things that I did, especially now during the pandemic, because we are all the time at work and because we're all the time at home, and then home becomes work, right? So there's no, okay, I stopped working, I left my desk, and now I'm like away from my work. So I try to make sure that that I schedule things with my students really during working hours. I try to make sure that I don't have deadlines who are like Monday morning or let's say Saturdays, because I try to encourage them to not have to work outside of regular working hours, because the point is that yes, you can always do more. I mean, that you can always, and as an academic, we always have like extra work to do, because even if you're not doing an experiment in the lab, then you might be reading a paper, or you might be, you know, writing a paper, or you might be doing research. There are so many things that you can always be doing that concern your work, but you need to find things that are different from that, that give you also some kind of peace of mind. And I'm very active. I always was, even during my PhD, I was a member of a bunch of societies, and I did like theater, and I played music, and I made films with my friends. And the point was that even if you are very passionate about your work and about chemistry and what you're doing, you also need to do other stuff, because it's really good sometimes to just disconnect, because you become saturated. So even when things are going great, you need to think to yourself, I need to do something else. Because the problem is, a lot of the time, when people try to feel like, oh, I need to rest, is when they start getting burnout, when they start feeling like, oh, I can't do this anymore. But you need to do the housekeeping. You need to always think about, I need to rest, I need to find myself some time to do something else. Because when you think, oh, I need to stop myself now, it might be a bit too late. So I think that as a supervisor also, it's important that we tell our students that we tell our students, like, take this weekend, like, just, you know, do something fun this weekend, and ask them what do they do, like if they did something fun. Like, this is something I did with my students. Especially we had like a challenge of doing something fun every day and every week, and then we will talk about these things just to encourage them to do stuff differently than just working on their thesis. And that's my advice on the work-life balance. So always try to keep your mind in check, and always try to do something that brings you joy. If working in the lab brings you joy, that's great. Try to find also something else, because not just be defined by that one thing. Because the moment that that one thing fails, then your identity comes crashing down. So you really need to find yourself activities that no matter what is happening with your chemistry or with your project, you can find some kind of joy and peace in what you're doing.
Great advice. So to find a second passion next to research, and also to take rest. So that is something that brings me to the next question. It's maybe some of you, or the questions would be, what is your experience with keeping your body healthy? So do you practice any mindfulness techniques or any sports, or what maybe are there any techniques that you already developed that take you off from the research part? Maybe you want to continue, César?
Well, so what I did, this was something I started doing during the beginning of quarantine. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have a morning routine to make myself happy, and that included playing the piano for a bit, like for an hour, and doing a bit of exercise. Now, after 6 months of quarantine, I don't have the mental space to go through the whole thing, and I stopped for a while. I'm trying to restart again in that routine, but those were two activities that really make me happy. So playing music is something that relaxes me, and then for 1 hour, even if I'm really bad at it, I'm just starting. So it's something that takes my mind out of problems, and I'm just trying to do something, and it really makes me feel happy. So that's for me my main activity to make me happy.
That sounds great. Anna, do you have anything that you do to get your mind off of work and research?
Yeah, so I was never very good at sticking to one hobby or one activity, right? And at first I thought that was my issue, that it was somehow a failure that I couldn't commit. But I've actually learned that the one thing that distracts me is just doing new things, right? So like César said, at the beginning of the lockdown, I started a morning routine, which was my allowed 1 kilometer from our house door walk to the local park, and I knew every grass, right? So I couldn't keep going. So then I did a little bit of yoga at home. Then there was like this free thing on Netflix where you could do workouts with a shouty American person. And that was great for a while. So for me, it's always just whatever works in the moment. So you know, I'm just like, I feel like for me, I just need new things that require so much concentration that it really just pulls me out of thinking about work or whatever is going on. And yeah, so I've been kind of jumping from thing to thing. I mean, yoga is a recurring theme. So I bought myself like a travel mat. So when I go to travel, it's in my suitcase, and I've been doing yoga in very interesting places at conferences and, you know, going to beam times. But yeah, I'm kind of not very consistent in what I do, but I think it's extremely important that you always have one thing that, you know, can pull you out, particularly like César said, if things go bad, right? How do you pull yourself out of that one identity that can sometimes become very overwhelming, where, you know, I'm a scientist and that's how I identify. Well, actually I identify as many other things, but somehow you don't remember that in the moment, right? So I think that's just so important.
Right. So thanks for these insights. So now let's come from managing our private life and getting our minds off of research back to the work part. And of course, we all as scientists learn how to do research and how to study and learn new things and solve problems. But at least I personally, and most people probably, don't receive a really professional training in teaching. There's maybe some courses later on, but we are not really prepared for teaching, and also not for managing a team. And my question would be now, how have you tackled these challenges? Were there maybe some trainings that you could take, or how did you solve that for you? So Jesús, do you want to?
Yeah, actually, I totally agree with you. I mean, I've been appointed lecturer just 2 months ago, right, in July. And well, supposedly you were supposed to have a semester off teaching, so to speak, so you could focus on your lab, your applications, funding, blah blah, all this sort of thing, and then along the way, hopefully get some training to actually teach. So the thing is, I guess in other United Kingdom universities might be similar, but we have what we call a new academics program, which is basically a program that the university gives you to give you some hints on how to teach, how to do proper teaching and all that. So I'm just receiving that, and I'm starting my lectures in, I think it's 3 weeks from now. So let's say just like just in time, right? So, but at least we have this, you know. So at least we have this, and I'm happy I have it. I don't know how useful that will be because I'm in the middle of it, and you know. But there is that training to some extent, but I know in other universities there's not. And like in Spain, where I come from, you know, my home university where I did my PhD, that's unheard of. So basically, what they can do is just give you some teaching duties. But that's just a way to relieve the stress of the academic who is in charge of the lab or the module. So mostly I would say that there's no formal training in that. And that's something of concern. But at the same time, I do understand that when you're a researcher, when you're a PDR, a postdoc or something in a certain place, you're supposed to do research there, you know, not teaching. So I wouldn't know how to tackle this, to be honest. Maybe the way that my university is doing it now, but probably more in advance, you know, and you could attend mock lectures or someone else's lectures before doing your own, you know. But yeah, and when it comes to the other part of the question, right, managing a team. So I've never had any formal training in that. So, and I doubt there's programs like that in universities and research centers. Maybe the other panelists can tell if they have encountered these situations. But what I have done to that extent is basically observe my own group leaders. You know, I mean, I knew I wanted to be an academic, and I knew I wanted to be a group leader eventually. And hopefully, if I can set up my lab, I will be in the next few months, years. So what I have been doing is pay close attention to what they've been doing and learn from the good and the bad. There's a lot of bad. I won't say who's doing the bad things, of course, but the point is, you realize their approach. You take note of their approaches to doing things, you know, and sometimes it's not necessarily good or bad. I mean, the definition of good or bad is somewhat arbitrary, but you can see what fits better to your character or not. For instance, I could say something that I love from my previous supervisor at Max Planck and in Dortmund. He would connect a lot personally with the PhD students and postdocs, and he would go to lunch with us as much as he could, and he would always do the Monday and Thursday meetings, right? So the Monday meeting would be something to basically catch up with everybody, and everybody in 5 minutes tops would say what their week was going to be up to, so what they would be doing, so all of us could see how we could interact in the lab or how we could arrange something. And then the Thursday meetings would be problem-solving seminars. If someone faces a problem, let's brainstorm together, see what we can do. So he would be very, very good at managing the team in that level, and say, let's keep it all engaged and at least close to each other, professionally and then personally. There was always time for, we would do always this hour of coffee after lunch, so nothing too formal, something like sitting down and discuss, so he was great at that, and that's definitely something that I want to do with my future students. So the point being, I didn't receive any formal training, but I do believe that you can learn from attitudes of your leaders that could work for you, and you've seen work over the years, and other people, I don't know, they just treat not with enough respect, or they are not organized, so you have to take note of those things as well and just avoid them. So yeah, that would be my observation of this.
Anna, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I definitely, the learning from bad things you've observed, definitely a good thing. I definitely have a longer list of what I really hope I don't do to my group now.
I did too. I wanted to focus on the good, but I did too.
It's like I'm constantly afraid that I do things, like I'm horrified that my group actually, talk to them. Maybe they think I'm horrible, right? So this has been my constant, dark cloud hanging over me. So I try and check, right? But then I feel stupid because I'm like, am I nice enough? Like, are you okay? And I think the fact that they sometimes do tell me good things and bad things means that at least we have some form of communication going. So I take that as a good sign. But on the managing, I think we all learn as we go. We learn from experience, our personal experience. And I think one thing that I picked up from what Jesús said was also this: pick what works for you. And I think that's so true for both the teaching and the managing. We are all individuals, right? And there will be things that just match with our personality and what we feel comfortable with. And there will be things that other people think are so powerful that just don't work. So, for the management one, for me, what was a really good experience was I used to work in industry quite a bit during my diploma. And that gave me quite a lot of the sort of formal, this is how, management works in a Germanic pyramid structure, and, the kind of, paperwork side of management. But that kind of taught me how do I keep track of everything that's going on? How do I make sure that we have an organization in the lab that works for everyone? How do we divide, tasks in the lab that we all hate? Like, who deals with waste? Who deals with, ordering things? Like, to try and distribute this, not overburden people. I think that the industry experience was very helpful. On a personal level, I'm definitely still learning, right? You're gonna experience more and more just, things that happen to people in your group, to yourself, to your surroundings that you have to deal with. And I think you never stop learning. On the teaching thing, I always find this quite interesting because I was in a maybe special situation in that I took on 2 full lecture courses as a postdoc, which don't do that. If you are a postdoc, run. If anyone ever suggests you do that, it's not a good move. And it doesn't help you that much on your CV. Like, a bit of teaching experience, absolutely, but teaching 2 full-on courses, no. But it happened. I said yes. I had a Christmas break to prepare 2 new lecture courses for first and second year undergraduates. It was horrible, but somehow it was sink or swim into the deep end. Somehow I managed not to drown. And then what I felt was that, particularly for postdocs, teaching training is never really advertised, right? It's not that anyone encourages you. Like we said, your main job is we've hired you to do a project. And sadly, many PIs focus on that, right? Maybe not so much on the development of you as a person as a whole for your wider career, whatever that might be, but just like, you're here to do a job, we need papers, we need to tell our funder, you know, they've paid your salary for a reason. So, but actually, if you look, at least in the UK, most universities will give postdocs an allowance of personal development days. They will give you a certain number where in principle, your boss is not allowed to say no, that you can do training, and that can be whatever you want. So I went and just figured out what teaching training there was, and, you know, selected a couple of courses that I felt were useful. Although I have to say, like at the beginning, it was definitely a lot. Yeah, I'm just getting some feedback. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. I think it's gone. Yeah, so I think for the teaching, if you're a postdoc, if you're in a position where you want to learn more, find the people, because every university, there are people in your educational unit that really, really, really care about teaching. And they're actually the best mentors, and they will be so passionate to come, sit in your lecture, give you feedback, point you to resources. And yeah, and that's the last thing, I come back to what I said before, figure out what works for you, right? Because there are so many options now of how we can teach, and so many different tools. Just find the one or two that work for you, and maybe don't try and do everything, you know, the first time you teach. Maybe survive, and then you can build up on it.
That will be the way for me this semester, I think.
I want to say that this is something like the teaching and the training for postdoc is something that in Ghent, it's essential to the university. So we have the postdoc community here, which is a community. Actually, our objective is to help postdoc learn all these tools that we need to be successful researchers, because it's not just about knowing, you know, the periodic table and the CO2 potential or stuff like this. We need to know how to manage people, how to teach people, and these are the courses that we focus on in the postdoc community. So we here in Ghent, there's a special group which is also called Postdoc Talent Management, and they specialize on creating these kind of courses so that everyone can join them and follow. So, and it's not just for people who want to stay in academia, it's for everyone, because if you think about career progression, at some point, most people with a PhD will be doing some kind of leadership, either in a research group or in a company. So knowing how to manage people, knowing how to negotiate, knowing how to be creative, knowing how to pitch ideas, these are some of the courses that the university here offers for postdocs. So I'm really happy about that. So I have had proper training.
Sorry, Cesar, we appear to have lost your audio there for just a second. Oh,
my internet sometimes.
Yep, you're back.
So okay. So we have these courses that you can take, normally one per semester, and you are as a postdoc, as a PhD, you are not just learning and not just growing as a researcher, you're growing as a person, and you're supposed to be developing the skills that need to help you on your career. So you shouldn't be afraid of looking up these courses and going for them. And if your supervisor is not very keen on those, you should try to convince them otherwise, because at the end of the day, these skills will help you be more successful in the lab as well. So you can always try to sell them as, look, I'm just doing this because this is gonna help my research as well. So try to look for them. And as Anna said, most universities do have an education department, and even though these things sometimes are not advertised so broadly, if you look for them, you might find them.
So it's a great advice, Cesar, also to be, also from Anna already, to be proactive, to look for options. Sometimes there are people that will help, and sometimes there are even courses and trainings. I just want to remind our audience that you can submit questions all the time, and we will address them soon. I will just go to one other aspect before we go to the Q&A, and this is the aspect of diversity. And César has been one of the, or has been a lead author on a recent editorial that has been published, the diverse view of science to catalyze change. And I was just wanted to ask you, what, if you want to summarize it, what would be the biggest challenges that marginalized scientists face, and what would be your advice that they can be overcome, because, or how do they, what additional advice and resources are good to make them resilient towards challenges that maybe not everyone faces?
For me, I think personally that the biggest challenge that I face is that most people are not really aware of the issues that we might face. So it's almost as if you have to have the same conversation each time when you talk to someone of like, oh, why haven't you done this? It's like, well, because, you know, my career path doesn't allow it because of X or Y, Z reason, or because it's just impossible for, I don't know, maybe visa requirements or so on. So it's always the main challenge is that most people don't even acknowledge that minority scientists face bigger challenges than most people. And that is very hard, because then you kind of feel discouraged to do anything, because you feel that your efforts are not being observed. Like, people are just ignoring what you're doing, and then they are just judging you with the same criteria as everyone else. But they don't consider the fact that for you to achieve something can be sometimes harder, or even when you do, then you have to work a lot harder than other people to be noticed. So this is a big challenge. Personally, that's what I think. And what we have to do is educate ourselves. I mean, we are researchers, we know how to learn. So just go out there, look in the internet and read about race, read about diversity, read about gender, and try to process these things, because you're not going to, obviously we're not going to become overnight allies and overnight experts in the AI, because we're not, we're chemists. But I think if we are exposed to these issues and we are aware of them, then we can make better decisions and we can be better to our colleagues.
Thank you. Anna, do you want to add anything, maybe also to put it as an extension? So what should we be doing to help also achieve equity in general across them?
No, I think César made excellent points there. I think particularly putting the pressure onto minorities to constantly justify, explain, and educate their surroundings, I think is one of the things that we particular scientists should be able to do ourselves, right? We can read, and even if you are not a minority, you can still read about their personal experience. You can look at the stats, right? And I think we can educate ourselves and be active in finding out, what does it feel like? What is it like to be not myself in this space, right? And particularly once you start your group, right? I mean, I'm super lucky to have an amazing, diverse group. And now I'm thinking, what are the things I can do? What is there specifically out there, like resources? And to be honest, at least in the UK, we are super fortunate. There are so many great groups and initiatives and support networks. And often as a supervisor, the one thing I can do is maybe just flag post them, right? Say, hey, actually, you know, I know that there's this group or that group, or this is something that we could do. And to be honest, I mean, for me, what happened, particularly in the US and around Black Lives Matter really hit me hard. Like, I had, to be honest, a couple of days where, you know, just thinking about the people I care about. And so I was just like, okay, group, we need to talk about this, right? I mean, we need to, I feel like, yes, of course, we won't fix the huge issues that, you know, many societies face, but what can we do as a research group? What can we do to make sure that people, when they look at our like X-ray spectroscopy group, they go like, that's a welcoming place. That's where I'd like to do a PhD. That's, you know, where I will feel safe and supported. And I think, you know, we can all have those conversations. We can all get it wrong, but I think it's our duty to learn, particularly scientists. I think we have no excuses.
That's great. Yeah. So, then I would start now. So first of all, thank you for this panel discussion that we have already now, but we will continue, of course, with questions that are submitted by the audience. So I asked the audience, don't be shy, you can submit your questions and we will address them. You can be any direction and you can address them at any of the panel speakers or to all of them. Just let us know. We have already a few questions there. So one of them, and I already apologize for the pronunciation, is from Bayan Al-Gandhi. They ask, I just want to ask all of the panelists for any advice for undergraduate chemistry students who are interested in research. So I suppose the question goes in the direction of how undergraduate students can already get involved probably in research and how they also manage their resilience in this context.
Well, I mean, there's a huge discussion on undergrads in the lab. First of all, there's a huge privilege if you're able to get some undergraduate research experience, because, well, most people don't have that opportunity. But what you can try to do is some countries and some labs, they will always be happy to have you working for free, but you shouldn't work for free. To try to find someone to pay you for it. In some countries, this actually happens. Like in Germany, there's the student job where you can actually get paid to do research. So this is something that it's useful. There are some specific societies have grants for undergraduate research. So ACS, for example, you can apply for a grant to get paid to do some research during the summer. So I would encourage people to do that. I would never encourage people to do free labor because it's very tempting to just say, come to your lab and work for free, and that's going to be amazing. But it's not fair. So you should try to always get paid for your job, for your work.
It's not, allow me to jump in here. Not only unfair, but be careful with those things, because sometimes insurance might be an issue. If something happens in the lab, there's no, I mean, especially if there's no contract. I mean, you can work for free with a contract. It's kind of a rare situation, but you can do that. So also be aware that you're properly covered, because when you're an undergrad, you're learning and a lot of stuff can happen in the lab, you know. So take care of yourselves by not putting yourselves in a position where you can be left behind, let's put it that way. So it's not just about labor, but also about being safe and not safe, but covered if stuff happens.
Then we have another question from Alus Dalia. Sometimes I feel guilty that I have stopped working in on my thesis project. Do you have any advice on how I can overcome this?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes, I will repeat. So sometimes I feel guilty that I have stopped working on my thesis project. Is Alus Dalia asking, and then do you have any advice on how I can overcome this?
Oh, I completely understand you, because I sometimes still do this guilt trip that you take a day off and then you feel like you should be working harder. But the point is, you need to understand that no matter how hard you work, you will always be better if you are rested, if you have like a fresh brain. So it's still, it's a constant fight. I constantly have to fight myself on this issue and tell myself it's good to take a break, but you need to take a break. So just don't be scared to do it. Just imagine yourself. I mean, the world is not going to end. Take a day off. Just do it and try to really enjoy it. Try to not think, because that also happened to me a lot at the beginning when I was trying to take a day off. I was feeling so guilty that I ended up not really enjoying the moment that I was away from the lab, because I was constantly thinking I should be in the lab. So I wish I could tell you it disappears. It does not. You have to really keep reminding yourself that you are entitled to free time and that you should enjoy your life outside the lab. And you have to tell it to yourself until you believe it.
Yeah.
Especially.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
All right. So, yeah, especially because when you're working in the lab, there's always stuff to do. There's always, I think we discussed this before, right? I mean, there's always more graphs or more experiments you could be doing to validate something, or there's always, let's say like a thesis, if we're talking about a PhD, is never ending in principle. You have to put an end to it, and an end to it comes usually with the end of your contract. But even then, it can go on for a little while. So the point is, I wouldn't feel guilty because there's always so much more that you could be doing, you know, and you're not gonna end up well. It's not about just getting the degree, you know, it's about learning and knowing how to manage a lot of things, mainly scientific, but also what comes with working in a lab and in an environment of people working for their similar yet different purpose. So I wouldn't feel guilty. You do that very often, I can understand you can feel guilty, of course, like you take too many breaks, but I think overall is above all is mental health, you know, and keeping the balance right. Just keep the balance right. That's super important.
I just want to add, so I absolutely agree. No one should feel guilty about taking time off, right? For sure. But I think we also have to appreciate that at least in academia, many of us will feel guilty when we walk away from the fume cupboard or whatever it is. So my dirty trick for myself is, right, because I'm definitely someone who feels guilty. I've kind of fessed up to being a bit of a, you know, not so good at work-life balance. So I trick myself when I know I want to take an extra day off, right, which is, I don't know, a silly thing to phrase it already that way. But then I set myself two like annoying things. So for me now it's admin things, right? Oh, I really need to do this. It takes half an hour. But then I tell myself that if I do that the day before, then the day off is a treat and I deserve it. And that's
actually,
how psychologically.
That's a good approach.
I trick myself.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant, actually. That sounds brilliant. Then the guilt is gone, right?
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's stupid, but at least for me, I'm not saying this works for everyone, right? But for me, I found that if I tell myself that it's, you know, the sort of Pavlovian reflex of, oh, I've done something nice, the bell is ringing, now I'm allowed to take some time off, right? It does work, and it makes me feel less guilty and much better, and I can actually focus on the time off and whatever fun stuff I was doing, right? Otherwise, I'm just very bad at switching that guilt switch off.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard for me to. I do a lot of stuff outside of my lab work, but at the same time I often feel like I should be doing more. But then you just remind yourself, yeah, this is actually okay. This is okay. This is okay. You might panic for a few minutes, and then you continue.
So I have another question then, which goes a bit in the direction of holidays, taking holidays. And my question would be, do you still take holidays? And if you take them, or when you take them, do you turn your email off? Or so how do you handle it that you, so are you, because when getting to some positions where we feel we are really responsible for people or for facilities, so how do we ensure that you still, if something happens in the lab, for example, that you still get informed, but at the same time, so do you turn your email maybe off to external people, or how do you handle if you get review requests or things like that?
Well, my email, I'm really bad at that. So I went on holidays and then I didn't put it on my email, like I'm not checking my emails. So I just got a lot of emails that I didn't reply to. Normally I tell the people I work with directly that if they want to reach me, just send me a text message if something is urgent. But I remove the emails from my phone and I don't look at my email on my computer when I'm on holidays, because yeah, otherwise you open it for 5 minutes and it's not 5 minutes and then you just on a rabbit hole. So I'd rather do it like completely no approach, so I just don't look at them.
Impressive.
Yeah. I guess how often you check them or whether you can afford not to check them depends a lot on your level of responsibility. So I understand the for instance, myself, I just took an academic post, which is higher than a postdoc, let's say, right? It was a step up in my career, so to speak. I don't have a lab yet, but eventually I will. And precisely this sort of circumstances where something went bad, or I don't know, God forbid, but my student gets hurt in a lab environment or something, I have a degree of responsibility there. So I have to be available even if it's on holiday. So it's hard to avoid and dodge these situations. And I'm going to be honest, I am the kind of person that checks the email all the time. But then being honest with myself and knowing that I deserve some holiday or something, then I may not respond right away, you know. So yeah, it's difficult to balance this thing. I personally don't know how to adapt to this, and I know that the longer time you are in a more of a leadership position, the worse it gets. And honestly, if anybody has some advice, I mean, I do take César's advice, but I don't know if that would work for me. So if any other piece of advice, I would gladly take it. So I could learn something here.
I feel like I'm somehow halfway between the two of you. So I religiously put an out of office in place. So I don't feel like I have to reply while I'm away. And then what I do is I turn all my automatic notifications off. Like, for example, UCL now uses Teams a lot. So I really say no notifications, no automatic pop-ups on my phone. But what I found for me is I tried the not checking emails at all, but actually that freaked me out more. Like, my anxiety levels were through the roof because I thought, oh my God, what if there is this magical person who's going to give me, I don't know, £5 million for my research, but I have to respond by tomorrow. So now I allow myself, right, to check my emails, but I make an active decision to do so. So I usually wake up early, even on holidays. I can no longer sleep in. If anyone has any advice on how to sleep in, tell me. But then I will, you know, before anyone else wakes up, I'll get myself a nice cup of coffee, sit down and really just scan through and pick a few emails that I would really like to respond. And then for my group, I mean, this is a big thing, right? That I really struggled when I started having people who I was responsible for. I was more freaked out than when I did things in the lab myself. So we use Slack in the group, which has been a great way of communicating formally and informally. And my students know they can always grab me on Slack. Like, I might not answer emails, but if anything, you know, if they need anything, and it doesn't have to be as bad as an accident, right? Sometimes it's just like, I don't know, I'm not feeling great, I'm freaking out, I need your help. Can you just look at this one thing? Right? They know that there is an alternative pathway, but that pathway is only open to my group, only to the people who I really feel like I'm responsible to a greater or lesser extent. And I think for me, I could never be without that. Although actually, so at UCL, what happens is that when I go on official holiday, I need to nominate a colleague who is their point of contact for safety. So one of the colleagues on the same floor or who does similar chemistry will actually act as my replacement. So for the really awful things, right, where something might happen, then there is an official contact person that is there to help, and they would have my mobile phone number. So they could say, you know, we really need to get in touch. But let's be honest, right, that happening statistically is very, very low, right? It's more you feel like you're gonna miss emails. Yeah. And about reviewing journal papers, that's a definite no. Like, I mean, if you're on holiday.
I agree with that, yeah.
Great. Then, if there are no other questions from the audience, I will have a last question again, which you can combine with some final advice that you might want to give. And that is, so I personally feel when I work 7 days a week, that my productivity goes down. So I have also noticed that if I take a day, at least, off where I really don't do any work, it really refuels. And at first I didn't believe it, but then I did it a few times the whole weekend, and I noticed that the next week was much more productive than a week where I worked the weekend before. So my question was now, what are your thoughts about this, and what maybe final advice what are your final thoughts on resilience and what we should do to keep us going through the pandemic and other things that might come up in our lives in the future?
So my advice is try to find a course on time management. So I did one just before the pandemic that was very useful. And one of the things they said was that different tasks are better performed at different times of the day. For example, when you are trying to do creative tasks where you have to think and write and do some creative writing for like writing a paper, this is better off when your brain is tired. So, and when you have to do tasks that are very repetitive, that are very annoying, that don't give you any joy, these tasks are better done with a fresh brain. So one of the things that they suggested in this course was that if you have something to do that you know is very tedious and very annoying, try to plan this right in the morning. Try to do this like the first thing that you do before doing anything else, because if you can accomplish this before 11 a.m., then you can do it during the day. So that's one of the things that I try to do. So I have a lot of tasks that are very, very annoying. So I try to tell myself, okay, I'm going to do this in the morning, and the first thing that you do is not open your emails, because emails are like a rabbit hole of things to do. Try to be careful when you're more productive, and that's about like knowing yourself. So when are you best at doing things? And then try to schedule your work accordingly, and try to schedule also your time off. So that's, for me, that's the most important. As you said, taking time off helps you. So just schedule it and just put it into your calendar. Like, this day I'm off, this day I'm doing this. And it, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when I didn't have a routine and everything was disrupted, it really helped me a lot.
Yeah, so I would agree with that, and it goes in line with what I said before. Take your free time, the concert you want to go to, the football match you want to watch with your buddies, your tennis class, whatever you do. Take that as an obligation to yourself to have the time off. In your case, like you said, you think now, or you think that taking at least one day off a week refills your batteries. If you can adapt this side activities that I said to that specific day or weekend, that's great. If not, because I don't know, the concert you want to go to is on a Thursday evening, do that. Do feel like you have that obligation to yourself. I mean, because in the end, it's about being fulfilled with yourself, because you're the person who's going to be with yourself the whole day and the whole life. So let's make the best out of it. Do work, but take time off. It leads nowhere if you don't.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me is that what I had to particularly learn was just to listen to my body, right? Like, because at some point it will give up. And I have worked to the point where it was like, yeah, okay, you need to stop, right? And I think just realizing what works for you. We're also different, and it's such an easy thing to say, oh, just do what works for you. But actually figuring out what that is, like, what's the thing that really relaxes you? What's the thing that really decouples you from the work? And whether that's a day a week, or taking 3 weeks off in summer, or I don't know, taking every morning off and starting work at lunchtime, whatever it is, right? But I think this kind of, I like this, it's an obligation to yourself to figure out what that is, right? And we all need downtime. I mean, absolutely, right? And okay, if you're an experimentalist, your group might have some limitations in that, well, we need people kind of to be in those core hours because you need to help each other, right? There might be some limitations that your workplace sets to say, you know, we're a group, we need to work with each other. But hopefully most research groups now have understood that every person works on different time scales, right? Some people start late, finish early. And again, this whole, when do you take time off, right? I think just try and take some time to kind of really actively think about it, right? But then also don't make yourself feel bad, right? I think we often put a lot of pressure on ourselves. You know, we see people who are really good at being resilient or really good at taking time off. And then sometimes you're like, oh, why am I not more organized? Why don't I book my holiday 6 months in advance? Why? So I think finding the balance of, you know, finding whatever works for you, but also being okay to say, yeah, okay, I completely failed at that right now. Let's just try and do it better the next time round. I think giving yourself that credit of, yeah, fine, didn't work, we'll try again.
Then let me thank you all for taking the time and being available today for our first ChemVoices webinar on resilience, key to overcome challenges. It has been a really great panel discussion, and I want to really thank you for that.